Thanks for joining us. This episode is brought to you by our good friends at Oracle NetSuite. Check out netsuite.com/legends to turbocharge your growth. And the new book, Niche Down. Check out nichedownbook.com to get your free foreword by the legendary Hal Elrod. Today on Legends and Losers, John Warrillow. He's a very provocative and fascinating entrepreneur and author. We talk about how to build a business that operates without you, how to build a company that's actually worth buying, why reoccurring revenue is a good thing and how to build some, and he teaches us how to sell a company and live happily ever after. All right. Joy Ramone said, hey ho, let's go. And Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Hello, my legendary friends. Welcome to Legends and Losers, where we aspire to bring you riveting conversations we're sharing, and we try to hack some of the best minds in Silicon Valley and beyond. And today we have absolutely done that with entrepreneur and author John Warrillow. Now, before we get to John, our good friends at NetSuite want to help you turbocharge the growth of your business. And as we have this discussion today with John, what he's really talking about is how do we build a business that operates without us? Well, in order to make that happen, you need a foundation for growth. And that's exactly what NetSuite is. It allows you to take the key business processes, whether it's accounting, cash flow, as well as your website. Today, we live in what's called an omni-channel world. We need to have purpose-built capabilities to sell and service our customers, whether it's on social platforms, on mobile platforms, on the web, etc. NetSuite is built to be the platform for growth for small entrepreneurs, from the garage all the way to the IPO and beyond. And NetSuite is offering our all of our good friends, and our less good friends. An opportunity to meet with a growth expert in your industry. Go to netsuite.com/legends to set up some time to talk about opportunities and potential barriers and how to overcome them. And who doesn't want to do that? We want to overcome what's stopping us, and we want to optimize what's working. And if you go to netsuite.com, you'll be able to schedule that time with a growth expert in your industry. Check out netsuite.com/legends. Now, John Warrillow. When I first heard of John and his book, Built to Sell, I thought, built to sell? What kind of BS is that? I believe in, quote unquote, built to last. Of course, the other legendary book with a very similar title, written by Jim Collins. And so, I've spent my entire career trying to figure out how to build, quote unquote, enduring businesses, category queen and category king businesses, the kind of companies that design and dominate new categories and deliver value for many, many years. And so when I first heard he'd written this book called Built to Sell, I thought, that's kind of a negative thing in Silicon Valley to be a company flipper. And then I realized what John's really talking about, which is he's talking about how to build a business that runs without you. And whether you're the owner or someone else buys it, you want to build a company that doesn't require you. Because if you built a company that requires you, the sad truth, of course, is you've created a job. Now, that could be totally cool, and that's what some of us want to do. If you're a solopreneur or a youpreneur, as my friend Chris Ducker calls them, then, you have to be there. But if you want to build a business that scales, then you need to build a business that doesn't require you, and that's where John's expertise comes in. So he wrote this book called Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You. He wrote another book about the subscription economy that's quite fascinating, called The Automatic Customer, Creating a Subscription Business in Any Industry. And he's also the author of Drilling for Gold, How Corporations Can Successfully Market to Small Business. If you want to get his entire background, check out our show notes at legendsandlosers.com. And here he is, a riveting conversation with the legendary John Warrillow.
I believe one of the secret sauces, or one of the really important things to get right, is recurring revenue. I think beyond just systematizing your business, which is what Gerber talks a lot about, I think not only to systemize your business is important, but also systemize the revenue stream. In other words, create some subscription-based revenue. And so I think that's one of the often missing pieces to a systemized business. Just because, like there's a checklist for how to open up or close up the shop at the end of the day, or how do you create all the different, you're using templates. That's great. It's a minimum sort of, but you've got to go beyond that. And I think subscription-based or recurring revenue is one of those really important things you got to get right.
Well, and I find subscription fascinating as a business model. As a kid who grew up in the software business, that wasn't the way it was, of course. And then in the late 90s, we started to play with it as a business model. And by the early to mid, 2000s, sort of 2004, 2006, some of us were really going for it. And then obviously today it's the primary business model. And the thing I found fascinating is how many companies that, of course, you'd never think of selling subscriptions. So of course Amazon tries to get you to subscribe to oatmeal and shit. And my current favorite, a few months ago, John, my wife decided that my underwear had to go. That was that. And it was time for new underwear. This is of course not something a guy, never, at least a guy like me, doesn't tend to think about. So I started to do a little homework, and I discovered that I don't know if you found this. There's been this breakthrough in men's underwear in the last few years. Did you know this?
I didn't know this. I'm waiting for you to tell me. You buy underwear on subscription now, let me guess.
Well, I actually don't. But so what I find out is there are all these new fabrics and these blended things so that your ball sweat gets handled properly.
It's all about absorbing the ball sweat.
Yeah, and cuddling the boys in just the right way and all this stuff, right? And so I've
been doing a lot of research in this area. How much research should you be doing in the ball sweat and
nut cuddling
area?
So blah blah yada yada. Try a couple different brands. Settle on this one that I like. They're called Me Undies, which I think is a terrible brand name. But anyway, so I go to buy them. After I buy one to sort of test them, so to speak. And then I go to buy like the big buy. We're going to throw out all the old shit and buy the new shit. And they want me to subscribe to MeUndies. And I think, why the fuck would you need to? I mean, what are you doing that underwear is a consumable that you need to subscribe to? I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, long story, way longer. If they're trying to get you to subscribe to underwear, I guess they're trying to get you to subscribe to almost anything, are they?
Exactly right. I saw toothbrushes the other day. So there's a company, I forgot the name of it. They're based in Canada, I think. They do toothbrush replacement. So they sell you the electronic toothbrush, and then for $5 a month, every 3 months, they ship you the new head. Because of course we all forget to change the head, right? So we all got electronic toothbrush heads from 1999, and they're terribly they're not hygienic anymore, and they're not doing what they should be doing. So the insight is, look, every 3 months you need to change these things. Who has time? So we'll ship them to you. I mean, the granddaddy of this, of course, was Dollar Shave Club, which I'm sure you know. Dubin and his friends built this thing up. They sold for 5 times top line revenue, $1 billion to Unilever. And you think, how on earth could Unilever spend that much money? God, buyers, acquirers love recurring revenue. They just, it gives them so much confidence that the thing is going to continue without the owner. And so yeah, Dubin was the real pioneer in this area.
Well, and I guess, and maybe this is an obvious no shit Sherlock, but once you subscribe to something, it just sort of gets baked into your operating expense and you sort of forget about it, right? And exactly. So I guess that's the hope, is that if the $15 a month or $50 a month, whatever it is, you just bake it in, it's on your credit card or wherever it is, and bam, you just forget about it. And I think a lot of us, certainly myself, I never look at that shit. And twice a year, my wife goes through our spending and looks at everything and goes, what the fuck is this? That, like, oh, I don't know. You just ended up subscribing to something. And so I guess it's powerful because not only is it reoccurring revenue, of course, but as consumers, we tend to forget what we're consuming, what we're subscribing to. At least I do.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to become like the gym membership. I'm not advocating for a second that people go out and in nefarious or underhanded ways get people to subscribe to stuff they don't want. I'm not suggesting that for a second. I think there's a utility to subscriptions that people forget. My favorite example is the guys from H. Bloom. Have you ever talked to Sanyu Panda or Brian Burkhardt from H. Bloom? So these are a couple of guys out of New York who decided that people, flowers, selling flowers is a completely asinine way to make a living, right? So you buy like an expensive retail space, you rent space, you're buying something that dies on the vine the moment you cut it. 2 days, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day are the times that people buy flowers. The rest of the year, nobody buys flowers. So it's a completely screwed up business. And these two guys come along and say, well, what if we did it on subscription? What if we went to the kind of fancy hotels and the fancy restaurants that want fresh cut flowers on the reception table? What if we sold those guys a subscription to flowers? Well, it turns out now H. Bloom sells these subscriptions. The average lifetime value of it as a subscriber of H. Bloom is like over $4,000 compared to the average transaction in a flower store, which is like $30. So, there you're taking utility, something that it was falling to the general manager of the restaurant to go replenish the flowers every 2 weeks. But now he still wants the flowers. He's not going to use them, but he wants, or she wants those on a regular basis. And so it's a great utility. So I'm not advocating people don't sell a subscription for something they don't need, but just that it's a better business model for both consumer and business.
It's interesting. I hadn't heard of them, but it makes total sense to me. And not just for businesses. My wife loves flowers, and we live in Santa Cruz, California. It's a wonderful place. And
I used to live in Santa Cruz, California.
You did not.
I did. 115 Swift. I think it was Swift. What's the road that runs along the coast there?
Well, there's East Clift and West Clift.
Yeah, West Cliff Drive. We were at 115 West Cliff Drive, right where they surf. There's a big break right there.
Yeah, that's where Steamer Lane is.
There you go. That's where we live right there. I used to look at Steamer Lane every morning.
Wow. How long did you live in Santa Cruz?
We lived for 6 months. We took kind of a break when my first son was born, and it was an awesome place. You ever see Neil Young kind of cruising around town?
No, we haven't seen Neil. I think he flies incognito. Although who knows, we might get hooked up with him. This is a complete diversion, but I have unexpectedly had Bill Walton land in my life in the last 9 or 10 months or so. And the incredible basketball player and now ESPN commentator guy. By the way, his book is awesome. I highly recommend it.
I haven't seen it.
It's called Back from the Dead.
Huh.
And do you know they invented the Grateful Dead Fan Hall of Fame for Bill?
I did not.
Yeah. He's almost a member of the band. He's been to well in excess of 200 concerts.
Wow.
And so
how did you meet him?
He and I were speaking at an event together in San Diego, which is where he lives. And I was the opening act and he was the closing act. And we ended up having dinner together, exchanging books, and just developing a highly unexpected but most wonderful bromance. And he's been on the podcast twice, and he sends me photos of himself with the proteas, and shit. And we talk a lot of music. And of course, he's friends with Neil Young. So I don't know. Maybe if I'm really lucky, I'll get to meet Neil through Bill one day. But having him in my life is an absolute miracle. Anyway, long story, way longer. As you might remember, in Santa Cruz, we have a few wonderful farmers markets every week.
Sure.
And so we buy flowers, I would say probably every other week.
Okay.
From a local grower here at one of the farmers markets. And, look, I'm a guy, so I'm speaking more on behalf of my gal, I guess. But it is really nice having flowers in the house.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and so it might
one of
be
those
good.
intangibles. Yeah.
It might be good as a retail business too. I mean, I don't know how many people would want fresh flowers in their house every couple of weeks, but I'll tell you, it sure is pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I mean, again, H. Bloom has figured that out immensely. That people do. There's a subset, and I don't think they target consumers. They target mostly businesses. But, from a business perspective, if you go back to kind of the business model for a second, if you know that you're going to get $4,000 from a subscriber over the life of their subscription, it changes the economics of running that company, right? So you can, at H. Bloom, they send sales reps on the road to call on all the hotels and restaurants and wealth management companies, and they call on them. And so that's not something the typical flower store has the money to do, right? Because they've got $30 a transaction. Half of that goes to the cost of the flower. They just can't afford that. And so they're left sort of working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, just trying to schlep flowers. These guys have said, no, we can send a sales rep. We can send a commission check for that sale of like $1,000 to that sales rep, because we know we're going to win $4,000 over the life of the subscription. So it just totally changes the business model for sure.
Yeah.
That's why Amazon's so totally, I bought deodorant the other day on Amazon, and they're pushing, hey man, subscribe and save, and you'll save 15% if you subscribe to deodorant.
No, I you just reminded me. I fucking subscribe to deodorant. No, I do. Here's what happened. Same thing. Same wife, same story.
You douchebag.
Hey, I said it with love. So I don't know how long ago now, maybe a couple of years ago, my wife discovers that putting the shit that Gillette sells or whoever the fuck makes armpit stuff under your armpits, causes brain cancer or whatever, causes your dick to fall off at 87 or something. That's not good for you. So we need to go au naturel. And she finds this company, I'm pretty sure they're in San Francisco, of course, who makes deodorant that's all made of natural shit. You can like when you read the label, you go, "Oh fuck yeah, vanilla! I know what that is, right?" And baking powder or what, I don't know what the fuck's in it, but I want to say the company's, I probably get this wrong, but I think it's called Native.
Okay.
Anyway, whatever. So yeah, that's their whole deal. It's all natural. And you subscribe to that shit. And so they just send the armpit shit every month.
Perfect. There you go. So you're a subscriber. You're a believer.
I guess I'm a believer, which is, I guess, better than being a believer or whatever. What do you call the bleebers or whatever the fuck the people who are Justin Bieber fans? What are they? Oh, they're called beliebers. There's some stupid name like that. Justin Bieber fans.
He's our best export from Canada, right?
No, he's not our fucking best export. I'll tell you who our best export is, other than every hockey player. Neil Young. Yeah. Leonard Cohen. I don't know if you can see it. Songs of Love and Hate is right there. Yeah. Those are, those are all the comedians. John Candy. Yeah. Everybody funny's from Canada. Although I must say, Jim Carrey has lost me lately.
My wife can't stand Jim Carrey. She repulses at the even side of him for some reason.
I thought he was great, and I was a fan, and I was super happy for his success until he started doing these horrible paintings. Have you seen what he's been doing?
No.
He's been doing these horrible. He takes paintings of people that he doesn't like. Most of them are politically oriented. Like he did the one that put me over the top was he did this very ugly painting of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the White House. And look, and again, I don't want to have a political discussion. This has got nothing to do with politics. I think part of the problem in the United States right now, in the political arena and partially in society, is we have forgotten how to disagree agreeably. And I think if you might love Republicans, you might hate Republicans, you might love Sarah or hate Sarah. But if you're going to attack her ideas. And instead, he attacked her looks. And I just think that's fucking, awful. And so, I'm not a fan anymore because I just don't think, I think attacking each other that way doesn't help. Attack the ideas. Let's have a debate, but don't attack the person and don't attack the way they look. Go fuck yourself, Jim. But I digress. So I've heard you talk a lot, John, about, a lot of small companies, small entrepreneurs. These companies are very sort of personality driven around the founder or founders. And while there's some valuable things to that, of course, there's also some liabilities. Could you help unpack that one for me?
Yeah. I mean, there was a big, rage maybe, 2, 3, 4 years ago where it's all about the personal brand, right? So all founders need a personal brand. You need to have, a big personality. And while I think it would be good for top line revenue growth, I think it's absolutely horrible for the value of the company. So, is Harpo Oprah Winfrey's company as an example, all that value without Oprah. You'd maybe make the case not so much. So I think it's dangerous to have a very out there person. Sometimes you find that like the name of the company is the same name as the person, right? So like, Bob Smith Trucking or whatever. And so Bob Smith thinks, well, that's going to be a problem if I ever want to sell my company because it's called Bob Smith Trucking. In that case, one of the things that we usually talk a lot to customers about is thinking about, is there a product that you could start leading with? Instead of like calling your company the kind of lead brand, is there a product underneath the company? So like I'm thinking of, I'm going to get this wrong, but like I think Johnson & Johnson were like two old doctors back in the 1800s, right? And they're the ones who created baby powder, right? Or tampons, or Tampax tampons, I think is one of their products. So instead of leading with Johnson & Johnson, the brand, leading with the product names, I think for business owners who find themselves in that space is a good idea. But yeah, I think if you've got too big a personality, it can help your top line revenue, but it can also make your business completely intractable from you, meaning you can't separate the two. And that's the definition of an unsellable company.
Yeah, and I've always thought naming the company after yourself is not a good idea generally, because if even forget selling it, as it's operating, if it's called, John's Trucking, and I'm not talking to John, then by definition, I'm not talking to the man. So if I'm a customer or a partner or whoever I am, and I'm talking to your vice president of logistics or whatever, well, he's not John. So, and so that naming the business after yourself sort of always puts you in the place of having to be in the middle of anything important, because by definition, it's got to be, because it's your name. And if you're the CEO as well, that's often the case with the CEO, regardless of what the company's called. So if you're John from John's Trucking and you're the CEO, well, I know that nothing's going to happen until I talk to you. And then the other reason I've never really liked it is I found my first company, I started with a partner and we made up a guy. So we called the business Roger Pierce, or Roger Pierce, and his name was Jack and my name's Christopher, and so people always thought there was this guy, right? So we could always say in a discussion, oh, well, yeah, John, we're really interested in doing this deal with you, and I think these economics probably make sense, not sure, but I got to go back and talk to them.
Right. I got to talk to Roger.
Yeah, because he's
like Charlie's Angels always had the Bosley on the speakerphone, right?
Well, yeah, we actually got the idea from, I don't know if you remember this TV show, Remington Steele.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Pierce Brosnan.
Right.
Yeah. We must be similar age, by the way.
Well, yeah, I just turned 50.
Oh, you're old.
Yeah. But we're both Canadians.
Oh, you're a Canadian too? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Montreal. I moved to the excited States over 20 years ago. So where are you from?
Toronto.
And do you still live there?
I do.
Nice.
Yeah, I do. So you were talking about Remington Steele.
Yeah. So the premise for the show was that it was a private investigation agency founded by a gal. And this show shows you how times have changed. She thought nobody would hire her given the field. So she invents a guy and names the agency Remington Steele after a non-existent guy, and then hires a guy to play the role of her boss, even though she's the one really in charge. And that, of course, was Pierce Brosnan. So my friend Jack and I was 18, he was 19. We were starting a company. We thought, well, nobody's fucking going to buy from us. A very similar premise. We thought, all right, let's make up a guy.
Perfect. Love it. And like entrepreneurs, business owners can do something similar when it comes to selling their company. So here, when you're in the throes of a sale of a company, it can get very personal very quickly, right? So you've obviously built this thing, you think it's worth a truckload. The buyer's trying to buy it for the least amount of money possible, and it can get quite personal. And so I love the tactic of saying, of holding up a board of directors or an advisory board as this sort of mythical, got to get the seal of approval group. So you're in the negotiations, especially because eventually you're probably gonna have to work for this guy you're across the table from, or this gal you're across the table from, for a period of time, right? So you don't want to come across as too much the bad guy. So you have this conversation with them. You're like, hey, listen, I like these deal terms. I don't mind having an earn out. I don't mind putting my money where my mouth is. But before I agree to that, I've got to check with my board. And I think that's a cool little tactic. It makes you, first of all, makes your company bigger than it might be already. But it also gives you that out to remain the good guy. Hey, I liked it, but the board has these concerns.
Yeah. I learned that early on. I read Mark McCormick's book, What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School.
Awesome.
And one of the things he always advocated for is you never want to be viewed as the decision maker. You always want to be able to go back and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
It also gives you, even if you are the decision maker, it gives you time to think. We never want to make a decision about a big thing like selling a company in a meeting, of course. Now, I've heard you talk, John, about earnouts and how much you don't like them. I've never liked them either. Could you maybe expand upon that?
Yeah, so earnouts basically is where you take some of your compensation when you sell your company. You take some of that compensation at risk, essentially. So they say to you, look, we love your business. We're going to buy it for, let's just make up a number. We're going to buy your business for $10 million. Hey, that's great. We're going to give you $3 million up front. And if you hit this and this and this ridiculous target, we're going to give you the other 7. And the problem with earnouts, well, there's a litany of problems. To begin with, you're out of control. You no matter how good your lawyer is papering the earnout, it's very difficult to control the process once you're a division of another company. And so typical things that a company might do is they might basically graph their expenses onto your profit and loss and say, well, that's the expense schedule of all of our divisions, and they will artificially deflate your profitability and make your earnout impossible. When you think about it, if you're the company, they'll sell you and tell you that we're totally aligned on helping you hit your earnout, but why would they help you if in many ways helping you makes them have to pay a truckload more for your company? And you see earnouts a lot in professional services organizations. Like the big guys, the big advertising agency conglomerates will basically pay a business, will buy a company today, and they might spend they might pay 10 times EBITDA, which sounds like a huge multiple for a services company, but they'll give you 3.5 up front, and then the rest stages in the future if you walk on water and chew gum and walk at the same time. Like the chances that you're ever going to see that are very, very low.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen this a lot in your career. I have, and I've experienced it, where people have convenient memory lapses and they move the goalposts. I had a situation, I probably shouldn't say the specifics, but the net of it was I was joining a company as chief marketing officer. We had agreed to a deal. As part of that deal, there was a stock option grant, and then there was a follow-on grant to happen in the second year that was pre-negotiated. Blah, blah, yada, yada. I get my offer letter, I sit there, and then the follow-on grant's not there. And the general counsel's actually the person that gave it to me, and I said to her, hey, there's this other piece, where is it? Oh, okay, sorry, goes back, checks with the CEO. CEO says, yeah, we did agree to that. And then I get this call from the CEO. He says, hey, can I talk to you about this? And I said, sure. He says, blah, blah, yada, yada, talk to the lawyers and accountants. If we put the follow-on grant in your offer letter, it has some horrible accounting implication for us. Grade 10 math was the hardest 12 years of my life. I don't know what the fuck it was, but it was bad for the company. So he said, look, I'll do whatever you want. If you want it in there, I'm good to my word. We'll take the accounting hit, or if you can see fit to take it out, my word is my bond, and away we go. Well, you know the rest of the story now, don't you, John?
I can imagine.
Guess who didn't get his fucking follow-on grant? And so you're right. There's always a reason to move the goalpost. There's always a reason to make it so you can't get to the thing or whatever. Always, right? Of course, and just to finish the story, he acts like I'm the asshole when I show up and go, hey, where's the follow-on grant? And he goes, essentially, follow-on grant? What follow-on? You fucking fuck, right? And so, yeah, I've always been leery of earnouts and the, I promise I have Coke at the apartment and all that other stuff.
Yeah, it's, I do this little podcast where we interview a different entrepreneur and we ask them about their exit, basically. And one of the questions I always ask is about their earnout and how was the experience. One guy told me he had a software company, acquired a big chunk of the compensation was on the earnout. The acquiring company, like 6 months after they bought his company, was in fact itself acquired, right? And so the second acquirer, if you will, made complete. They basically threw out all the commitments on the first acquisition, and then you're not dealing eyeball to eyeball with the guy who made the commitment anymore, right? So it's like some other person, right? So all you've got is a legal leg, and usually, Silicon Valley lawyers can basically, they do a good job of protecting acquirers, right? And that is their job, but they do a great job of it. So you're not gonna basically outgun or outlawyer a buyer's firm, right? Usually, there's something called a 5 to 20 rule. I don't know if you've ever heard this. Basically, it suggests that an acquirer is usually 5 to 20 times the size of the company it acquires. And so if you think about that, they've got 5 to 20 times the number of lawyers, 5 to 20 times the amount of money to spend on lawyering up to make sure that they basically ensure that you're not going to hit your earnout if that's what they want to do.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I for the most part have retired from doing advisor, consultant, board type stuff. I do a teeny little bit of it now, but I learned along the way as an advisor or board member or whatever, that kind of role. Any deal I do today is 100% tied to the CEO being the CEO.
Smart.
So, because I'm in biz, if you're the CEO, it's you and me working together. I'm not working for this fucking company. And to your point, acquisitions happen, IPOs happen, people get fired, people leave, whatever it is. I'm doing it for me, particularly at this stage of my life, John. Business is personal. And so I'm doing business with you. And so all my agreements today essentially tie the agreement and the relationship to you as the CEO. And if you're not there, I'm not there. And if it's a longer term relationship that has any kind of vesting or any kind of Scooby snacks in it of whatever sort, the minute you're not there, I get all my Scooby snacks, I get all my vesting, I go with you, and I get all the economics that were promised to me out into the future. And because I want to avoid all of that bullshit.
Smart. Really smart.
Yeah. Now the flip side, I will say, just to be fair, the last company I was CMO of was called Mercury Interactive, and we got acquired by HP for $4.5 billion, making HP my favorite company on the planet. And when that happened, the HP folks were overly good to the Mercury executive team.
That's great.
So every once in a while, it's the opposite. I mean, we could not have been treated better. And me personally, I was treated way better than a lazy alcoholic like myself should be treated.
Awesome. Well, good for HP. That's great. They're one of the good guys, obviously.
Yeah, there's clearly core values in that place. So if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm building my business now, and I think there's a possibility it'll be a business that will be sold at some point, what are the kinds of things, what are the trade-off decisions I should be making to help optimize that versus maybe optimize some other things?
Yeah, I mean, the classic is that a lot of entrepreneurs focus on revenue, right? Like, so they kind of, it becomes like a bragging rights, right? Like, we've got, we already hit 5 million in revenue, we're going to hit 10 million in revenue, and that can be a bridge to nowhere, right? So the more top line revenue you've got, oftentimes it means the way you've got that revenue is by cross selling, right? So you're selling other stuff to your existing customers, and oftentimes you're not that well differentiated on the other stuff. And that means that you're basically diluting your attractiveness in the marketplace because you're just becoming just this big hodgepodge of stuff, as opposed to selling one thing that you're really truly differentiated on. Because again, you think about it from an acquirer's perspective, they're making a build versus buy decision. They they might not tell you they're making that decision, but they're sitting there saying, hey, can we just basically knock these guys off? Can we just drop our price by 10 points and basically take all their business? If they're selling commodities, if they're cross-selling all kinds of stuff that they're really not differentiated on, then I could do that. I'm not going to buy the business. Yet if they've got one thing that makes them really tough to compete with, they've got something unique, and they're just hammering on that, they become really attractive. And so I think avoiding the temptation just to think your entire report card at the end of the year as an entrepreneur is your profit and loss statement, I think that's a really big temptation. I'll give you an example. This woman, Stephanie Breedlove, have you had Stephanie on your show?
I don't know Stephanie.
So Stephanie's cool. She wrote a book recently after building out a payroll company. So check it out. So she decides that she's an Anderson consultant, former Accenture consultant. She wants to do payroll for her nanny, right? Like legitimate, straight shooter, Midwest type, wants to do it right, not fudge it and pay the nanny cash. So she decides she's going to pay the nanny through a payroll company. She calls up ADP and she gets a terrible experience, right? Because ADP wants GM to call them and do like 50,000 seats. They don't want to do payroll for some little lady. I think she was in Texas. So Stephanie realizes there's an opportunity. So she builds a payroll company to pay nannies. So she goes around to parents who have nannies and say, look, if you call ADP or you call any of the paychecks, any of the big guys, they're going to treat you terribly. But if you come to our company, we're going to treat you like royalty, right? She builds it up, and she avoids the temptation to do what most of us as entrepreneurs would do, which is to start selling other stuff, right? So we're doing payroll for nannies. Well, why don't we do payroll for firemen too? Because surely they have payroll needs as well, right? But she decides not to, right? She says, all we're going to do is stick to our knitting. We're going to do payroll for nannies. 20 years go by doing payroll for nannies. She builds the company to $9 million in revenue. Okay, so we're not talking the next Google. We're talking $9 million in revenue. So she sells it last year for $54 million, 6 times top line revenue.
How many shareholders does she have?
None.
Yeah,
and her husband.
Now look, John. 55 million. You can't live on that, but it's a nice start.
Mr. HP. All right. Yes.
No, I'm kidding. HP did not give me 55 million for the record. No, I was being silly. I love that. And it's a great example of, what today we call a niche down. And right. The other thing we had. How do
I get your book, by the way? You got to send it to me when it comes out.
Yeah, I'll send you chapter 1, and as soon as it comes out, I'll send you the whole thing. We're furiously working on it. It comes out in mid-July is our current timing. And one of the entrepreneurs we feature in the book, and she's been on the podcast, her name is Anne Moorhauser. I hope I'm saying her last name right. She's the founder of what's called Annieglass. And she's here in the Monterey Bay area, not too far from Santa Cruz. Sure. And she talked about a niche down. She is the preeminent, what we call the category queen of handcrafted glassware.
Okay, cool.
And they're pieces of art that need to go in the dishwasher. And if you're a super ding-dong hotel or, restaurant and stuff, and then all the big ding-dong retailers, Neiman's and these places feature Annieglass. And I wish I remember the exact quote she said, but she was on this exact same point, John, which is sort of get that niche right and then just stick to it and resist, because she's in this creative design world where people want to take her brand and her designs and put them on beach towels and shit. And she's like, no, fuck you, beautiful glass, end of story, right? And she's got this, it's just very similar, I don't know the size of her business, but a very similar kind of thing where she's just stuck to that tight niche, stayed in that quote unquote swim lane, and she is the queen of that, period, full stop, end of discussion.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it makes tons of sense. And for product business, it makes a ton of sense. I think it's even more important for a service business, because the thing we forget as entrepreneurs is, I think as entrepreneurs, we feel seat of the pants, can figure it out as we go. I mean, that's, like, when's the book coming out? I don't know, maybe July. Like, it depends on when we get it done. Like, it's kind of, it's how we operate, right? As entrepreneurs, is we sort of do it as we go. Whereas employees, the people you need to deliver the service, don't work that way, right? They thrive on repetition and having the rule book and doing it again and again and again. And if you're doing way too many things, guess what? They don't have time to specialize, right? They're just trying to keep up with you. Oh, now he's going off and selling a cocktail now. Now the glassware is featured on a beach towel. So they struggle with that way more than we as entrepreneurs would struggle with it. And so we forget, if we want to scale up a business, it's all about figuring out the one thing, glassware, payroll for nannies, whatever, and just keep doing that. Because for people under you to get it right, they thrive on the repetition. Whereas you might not thrive on it, they do.
And then from a category design point of view, you just keep pounding home that category. I'll give you another one of my favorites. And I don't know these gals, but I love it. We discovered them in our research for Niche Down. They're two gals. You'll excuse me for forgetting their names. They're the co-founders of a bakery. And, most people open a bakery and they compete on the dimension of our shit tastes awesome, right? That's essentially their quote differentiator, which of course is no differentiator whatsoever. So these gals don't make that mistake. They're intuitive category designers. And so they discover a niche. They are the biggest chain, there's over 250 of them, of bundt cake bakeries. And the business is called Nothing Bundt Cake.
Awesome. Perfect.
And I'm guessing they probably don't sell bagels.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now,
but look, if Kroger's wants to get into the bundt cake business, well, who are they going to acquire? Some bakery that does bundt cakes and donuts and bread and pretzels and all the other stuff, or are they going to go and buy bundt cake? What did you call it? Bundt cake?
Nothing Bundt Cake.
Nothing but cake. That's who they're going to acquire, because they're going to, how would we try to compete with that? Do you know what I mean? So I think sticking to the one thing is so critical. Not only is it critical to actually get your marketing message out there, which I obviously know is part of niching down, but I think it has that ancillary benefit of making your company so much more valuable.
So let's talk about that. Why do you think a tight focus like that on a niche makes the company more valuable?
Well, again, it's the buy or build thing, right? So an acquirer looks at a business and says, if it's a diverse set of products and services, and most buyers want to get into a category, right? So let's use Kroger and Nothing But Cake, Bundt Cake. Kroger doesn't need to buy a bakery to buy white bread, because they have their own white bread, right? They have their own whole wheat bread. They have their own, all the other products in the bakery aisle, they've already got, right? And so if you have a company that does great bundt cakes, but you also make donuts and all the other products, Kroger's going to look at you and say, well, I love the bundt cake business, but that's a $5 million company. And the business entirely is a $50 million company. So I've got to basically buy $45 million of revenue I'm going to shut down just to get the $5 million of bundt cake revenue. Well, screw that. I'm not willing to spend $50 million. I'm not willing to buy the entire business just to get that one little nugget of value, right? Whereas if all you do is bundt cakes, and Kroger wants to get into the bundt cake business, 100% of the dollars of revenue that you're generating today are ones that Kroger wants to acquire. It just makes you so much. It's like cable, right? Like when you buy cable and you get 300 channels. Well, if I only watch ESPN and CNN, why do I need the other 298? No, nobody likes to buy the other 298.
They confuse the shit out of a dude like me, and it's so bad. I don't know if you do this. I have DirecTV, and they've been a wonderful company from a customer service point of view.
Good.
But there's 4 billion channels, as you well know, and you're not going to go dig out the piece of paper with the fucking tiny font to figure out. No, you just type in, whatever it is. whatever the Hallmark channel that you and I would want to spend time on, and you're not going to look that shit up. I Google that shit. You gotta Google Hallmark channel fucking DirecTV just to find out what fucking number it is, right? Yeah, I'm with you. I do love what you're saying. It's so powerful, and there's this crazy thing around that the value of the niche, the value of the category. So one of our mantras is categories make companies, not the other way around.
Nice.
And what I think I just heard you say in the Kroger's example is the value in a business like Nothing Bundt Cake is they own that category. And if they were in 200 other lines that were just Me Too product lines, that revenue is not valuable to the acquirer. What's valuable is that special, unique,
category,
massively differentiated category queen or king position that they have.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you remember the Facebook acquisition of WhatsApp? I don't know if you remember that a couple of years ago.
I remember it well, not to be a name dropper, but the VC in WhatsApp, Jim Getz, is a buddy of mine. And that was the biggest, and I think it still is today, single venture outcome in U.S. tech history. Right. To a private outcome, that is to say, not an IPO.
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, they created the category of subscription-based messaging platform, right? So all the other platforms at the time that were doing kind of messaging in the same way were based on advertising sales model, right? So you have to run, and the terrible ads that run as you're using their messaging device. And these guys came along and said, no, if we get people to pay $1 a year, which is a pittance, right? $1 a year to subscribe to WhatsApp, we can do it without ads. So they created a category. Facebook looked at it and said, there's more actual pictures being transacted, being sent on WhatsApp than there is being shared on the Facebook platform. They realized that in a lot of ways they had even a potential problem in that there was so many more pictures being sent on WhatsApp that they acquired it for, I can't remember the acquisition price. It was 16 billion or something ridiculous like that.
I think it might have been more. Hold on, we can ask the Google machine. And
at the time, I think they had 64 employees. Like, it was a relatively small company, and they got acquired for something ridiculous. But they had a category. They created it, right? And Facebook wanted that category. So
they paid 16 billion. Yep.
Yeah, 16 billion.
And here, you said something really important that I think a lot of people, to quote Archie Bunker, misconstrue, which is revenue growth, profit, EBITDA, profit growth. Those things actually have a surprising little amount to do with the acquisition price of a company.
Potentially. I mean, I think what we're talking about right now is a strategic acquisition, right? Where a strategic goes in, like a Kroger, like a Facebook, and say, okay, this company is worth more in our hands than it could possibly be worth to the current owners. And so we're going to write a check that makes absolutely no sense on economic terms. So that would be a strategic acquisition where, WhatsApp gets acquired for $16 billion. The financial acquisition is something slightly different in that a financial buyer would be buying essentially a future stream of profits. So under that scenario, oftentimes it's a wealthy individual or a private equity group, for example, would go in and say, okay, we expect this company to reliably churn out profit years into the future because they've got some little unique niche in the world, or they've just been so good and so solid for so many years that we're going to buy that future stream of earnings. But because they don't have any strategic assets to bring to bear, usually the valuation multiples are lower, more modest, and they are generally tied to earnings. But again, the real
here's what I would sort of add or sidecars to that, which is if you're an entrepreneur, that's not what you want to be selling. No. If you're selling the business based on financials alone, you have fucked up in some way.
Yeah, you haven't created any incremental value beyond just the earnings. Yeah,
because if you go back to the WhatsApp example, Facebook lost Skype to Microsoft. And in my opinion, that was a giant fuck up, because if Facebook had owned Skype, things would be very different than they are today, in my opinion.
In what way?
Well, if you think about, if you expand your mind and you say, Facebook is a platform for communication and engagement, if you'll allow me that jargon.
Sure.
Well, Skype being at the time the number one way to communicate on the internet, they fucked up royally not having that be embedded in Facebook. Because if Skype was embedded in Facebook, we'd have the engagement and the communication, and I think they would be in a much stronger position. As a result, I would argue to you that part of why they pay what they pay for WhatsApp is they buy the future, as you described. They buy the future category potential. So how's this thing going to grow, and how's that therefore going to affect revenue, earnings, EBITDA? I think that's a very important discussion in these big companies. But I also think the other part of the discussion is, hey, what the fuck happens if our competitor buys this?
Yeah.
And in the case of the WhatsApp discussion, and this is just my theory, I don't know this for a fact. This is not something Jim told me or anything, so I don't want to, misconstrue this. But I think if you're Facebook, having just lost Skype, you go, oh, fuck, that was intergalactically stupid. We will pay whatever we need to pay. And to give you a corollary in history, do you know what the number 2 search engine on planet Earth is today, right now?
Amazon.
It's actually YouTube.
Is it really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Is Amazon number 3, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, YouTube.
I don't know. We should look that up. That's important. But YouTube is, and if you're under 30, you don't Google it. You actually YouTube it for the most part. Yeah, that's been I don't have data on that, but my experience is that. Now, when Google
Do you know people under 30, by the way?
Yeah, I have lots of them around. Some of them I really like.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
There's some of them I want to punch in the face, but that's true for people over 50 too. But Google paid $1.65 billion for YouTube in 2006.
Sounds like a bargain these days, doesn't it?
Well, at the time, all the idiot commentators think, weed must be legal in California if you're willing to pay 1.62 money for a company with no revenue and rah, 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 rah. Really? You dumb fucks? Imagine if Google didn't have YouTube today.
So true.
And imagine how much more valuable YouTube's going to be 5 years from now. And so my point is twofold. One, what drives acquisition price is often the category potential.
Yeah.
And the competitive landscape around getting to that potential. And the company that's the category queen or king in that emerging category is by definition therefore going to have suitors. And the degree to which those suitors feel like, A, we need this to round out our product line, and B, come hell or high water, we need to make sure our competitors don't have this, is a huge driver of acquisition price, at least in my experience.
I think you're absolutely right, which is why I love the niche down idea. And I think you want to niche down to the point where you can be the market leader, even if it's in a tiny, tiny niche. Because I think acquirers buy category leaders, right? They might buy a number 2 player, but man, do they like they like paying a premium to be the number 1 player. So there were other video platforms out there at the time of YouTube, but just so happened that YouTube was the dominant category player. And so Google went out and said, okay, we want to be in this category, so let's buy the number 1 player. So if you're an HVAC company, as an example, well, that's great, but there are thousands of other HVAC companies out there. How do you own the category? My younger son, dealt with a little bit of asthma when he was younger. He's fine now, but when he was younger, and I've often thought, there's a huge niche out there for an HVAC company to go out there and say, no, we don't just install furnaces and do air conditioning units. We are the number 1 bulletproof asthma protection company, right? So if you have someone in your family that dealing with asthma, then one of the irritants is shitty, dirty filters. And so we come in and clean out your filters, and we do an air quality test, and we make sure that your son or daughter, your mother, whatever, are free of any asthma deals. So, I mean, that's not selling HVAC services, that's not another 1,000
Yes.
vendors are, right? That's saying we have the number one asthma protection solution. That's different than being an also ran HVAC company.
Well, and what I love about what
Yeah.
you're saying, John, is you are thinking in the context of the problem the customer has, and most entrepreneurs think in the context of the product that we have.
Right. They think of themselves as members of an industry, right? Like, I'm a plumber or I'm an architect, right? Well, the problem is once you genericize yourself that much, you're then just competing on price, because people can go Google what does an architect charge per hour? What should I pay to have clog an unclogged toilet? Well, just ask Google. There should be some pricing benchmarks out there on that. Whereas if you niche down to the point where you've got a category that you own as opposed to a generic, then you set the pricing terms and you certainly become much more attractive to an acquirer.
Yeah. The other interesting thing, I'd be curious to get your reaction. I remember years ago, I heard the legendary venture capitalist, one of the founders of Benchmark Capital here in Silicon Valley, Bruce Dunleavy, say, companies don't, you can't sell companies like this. They get bought.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, I've thought about the distinction between selling a company and having a company get bought. And I have had many conversations with entrepreneurs over time where they'll say, well, listen, we've been talking to Fred, Wilma, Betty, and Barney over at Investment Bank A, and what they're telling us we should do is engage them and have them go shop the company. And I say, no, that's the opposite of what you want to do. As a matter of fact, the minute you do that, you are going to materially cut the value of this company. What you need to do is do a set of things in the marketplace to make the potential acquirers desire it, so that they are calling you, and so that when we hire Morgan Stanley, we're hiring Morgan Stanley to deal with inbound requests to buy the company as opposed to outbound to sell the company. Because the minute Morgan Stanley shows up and knocks on, I'll just say Oracle, NetSuite, because they're a sponsor of Legends and Losers, knock on Oracle's door and say, hey, want to buy us? They're like, well, maybe. The price just got a lot cheaper. And so I guess all that said, how do you think about that, John?
Yeah, I mean, so I would never sell a company without an M&A professional doing it for me. I think there's just too much that can go wrong. There's too much emotion involved. And I think an M&A professional earns his or her fee by creating competitive tension. That said, I agree with you in the sense that a great company gets bought, they don't get sold, right? So, and I agree with you. What you want to do is make some great moves in the marketplace. In particular, make a splash at your industry event. I can't tell you enough how many deals I hear start because the founder meets somebody at an industry event. And there's something that they did at that industry event that's piqued the curiosity of an acquirer. So I think, being impactful, making an impact at your industry shindig in Las Vegas every year has a huge material impact. And yeah, I think you want the inbound inquiry first, right? You want, NetSuite or Oracle or whomever to come to you and say, look, would you ever consider acquiring? But from that point forward, I think you're best served from having representation. The worst deal you can get suckered into is what they call in M&A land, the proprietary deal or the prop deal, right? So, whenever they come up with a nickname for you, that's probably a bad thing. And so the way they shorten this is to a prop deal. The M&A guys we'll call it a prop deal, the corporate development people from the large company, if they've got exclusive access to a deal that doesn't have competitive tension. And when that happens, obviously the price goes down, the deal terms get much worse for the entrepreneur because they know they can screw them over at any structure. So I think the M&A professional plays a role, and I think their job is to make sure you don't get suckered into a prop deal. That said, I think the ideal scenario is that you've got 5 or 6 inbound opportunities before you hire one, because at that point you've got lots of cards and they can deal with some pre-existing competitive tension for your business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I was not suggesting that you should sell your business without real help. I mean, even if you're a legendary entrepreneur, it's incredibly complex. And if it is a company you said 5 to 20 times bigger than yours, you want some serious professionals on your side helping you deal with the trainload of lawyers and bankers that Oracle is going to have when they come to do the proctology exam. Now, the other thing I'm curious to add, yeah, just bend over. We have this thing we want to introduce you to. It's called a sigmoidoscope.
But my nuts are dry because I
exactly.
wear special underwear.
Because I got the new underwear. Yeah, exactly. I'm tracking with you. Now, here's something we run into a lot in Silicon Valley. Maybe you can shed some light on, John. And I'm not going to name names, but there are a handful of big companies in the tech industry, and I assume it's true in other industries, who will essentially make pretend that they want to acquire you, and as a result, try to suck you for as much IP as possible, and fuck you over in the end, and they were never actually really that serious. And there's a couple in particular, and every time an entrepreneur that I'm associated with calls me and says, "Oh, we just got a call from these people, and they're really interested in buying us," I tell them, "Oh yeah, here's what you need to do. Tell them to go fuck themselves, and tell them to go fuck themselves probably 15 times. And if they keep coming back, maybe because they have a reputation for doing what I just described." And so I guess my question is, as an entrepreneur then, how do I know that this acquirer or acquirers are serious as opposed to they're just trying to suck me dry for all my IP so that they can go build it themselves?
Yeah, it happens, by the way, all the time. Someone said, I haven't got the numbers, but the industry, the M&A industry talks about it somewhere between a third and a half of deals that start at letter of intent that go all the way to LOI. And getting an LOI for your business is a pretty big deal. Going from LOI to close, it's something between a third and a half that actually happen. And so a lot of companies will give you an LOI.
Let me interrupt you there.
Yeah.
Just give me that stat again.
Yeah, somewhere between a third and a half of deals that get to LOI ever consummate.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. It's a huge number. It's a huge number. And I mean, even if it's that's an industry term. Even if it's higher than that, suffice it to say, there are an enormous number of deals that go so far as to letter of intent that never get consummated. And it's for the reasons you raise. A lot of businesses, there's a strategy internally where they're saying, let's get these guys under LOI. And when you sign a letter of intent, an LOI, as an entrepreneur, you're usually having to sign at the same time a no-shop clause, right? Where you agree as an entrepreneur not to take your business out to anybody else. And the moment you do that, you lose negotiating leverage, right? Now, basically, the clock is ticking, and they don't care how long they take to do their due diligence. And every day that goes by, your sort of appetite to do the deal goes up because you bought the car, you bought the boat and the ski house and whatever in your mind. And so we're
going to Vegas, baby.
Exactly. Your willingness to accept bad deal terms goes up because you become desperate. And they know this, and they use this as a strategy. They use it as a strategy to lower the price at the last minute. They also use it as a strategy to get competitive intelligence, and then they'll manufacture reasoning and due diligence. So I think this is a really important point you've hit on. I mean, how do you avoid it? I think one telltale sign of a company that's fishing like that is a very simple and high level letter of intent. So if it's like a very vague letter of intent, that's something like we would consider buying your company for between 2 and 3 times top line revenue, and we'd use cash to do that, and we'd want to understand these 3 things in due diligence. That's too superficial. It's a letter of intent that smells to me like they're shopping and they're fishing, right? What you want is specificity in the letter of intent. You want to know real details, right? So like purchase price, not some range or a multiple of revenue. You want to know, I'm willing to pay whatever, $10 million to buy this business. I'm going to use this currency. It's going to be 100% cash or 80% cash and 20% shares or whatever. These in specificity is going to be our, the due diligence checklist, and it should be 2 or 3 pages long. And not only that is here's our cash flow working capital calculation, right? So here's how we're going to calculate working capital for your business when we make this transaction. That degree of specificity to me sounds like, okay, these guys are serious. Mentioning whether they've got board approval or not is also a good sign. If they've got board approval to make the offer, that's another tick box to ensure that they're not going to throw up the board as the reason they can't do the deal. If they say, something
you mean they might have their own Roger Pierce in the background?
Exactly. They might have have their own Remington steel. But oftentimes a public company will, this is contingent on board approval. Well, okay, and that's fine. But know that gives them an out. What are some of the other tactics and techniques you can use? Those would be some of the things.
Here's one that I've tried to be curious what your reaction is, because I want to smoke these fucks out as quickly as possible, because the way I think about it is, if you're not serious, every second we spend with you, we're wasting our time. We're not competing. We're not growing. We're not doing what we should be doing. So if we're going to do an LOI, I love all that specificity. That makes total sense to me. I also like to see a gigantic breakup fee.
Yeah, although tough to get unless it's a really big, sexy tech company. I agree. Yes, a breakup fee. Yeah.
So if I don't know. I own a small chain of pizza shops.
Yeah.
I can't nail, and they're going to buy my company for $25 million. I can't say, hey, listen, you don't get to pull out the Smoidoscope until there's a $5 million breakup fee. The other one I like is a fuse lit. And I don't know if this is common outside of tech, but generally there is some period of time, 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is, that this thing it lives for. And if the acquisition isn't done in that time frame, then you have to pay us the breakup fee. Is that you're saying that's hard to get unless you're the sexy gal or guy at the dance?
Yeah, so breakup fee, so the lighting of the fuse, so specifying the term of the due diligence period, I think is much more common. So generally, you'd have a 60-day window to due diligence, and the no-shop clause would expire after the 60 days. Oftentimes, acquirer will go in and say, look, we need an extra 30 days for if it's a prop deal, and go to 90. But that specificity around the due diligence period should be there. I would insist on it. If it's not there, make sure it's there before you sign an LOI, for sure. The no shop clause, it's been my experience, and maybe I'm wrong, it's very rare in a small to mid-sized company without a tremendous amount of leverage to get a no shop clause, to get a breakup fee. Breakup fee, if you don't know what it is, it's just basically a fee that the acquirer pays you if they, for whatever reason, decide not to consummate the deal after the LOI has been signed. God love you if you can get it. I've heard of it occasionally, but it's a little bit on Main Street businesses. Again, we're not talking Oracle buying Google or something like that, Google buying you.
Or Oracle buying NetSuite.
Yeah, you'd see the no shop clause in that case, because again, large enterprise company buying another direct competitor, in order to consummate that deal, they've got to share a lot of trade secrets with the acquirer. And
so do you think I'm giving bad advice to entrepreneurs when I say, hey, listen, you tell those fucks we get $5 million, we get 20 million, depending on the size of the deal, if this LOI expires and nothing happens?
I don't think it's bad advice. I think unless you have a tremendous amount of leverage, your deal is north of $100 million, for example. If you think you can sell your company for north of $100 million, then sure, I think a breakup fee would be something you would ask for, pretty standard. If you think your business is worth $5 million, I think you're smoking something to think you're going to get a breakup fee.
Even a $250,000 breakup fee?
Again, maybe. I think you can ask for it. If you've got a really great, if you've got a great offer from a great buyer, it's a $5 million business and it's going to change your life to sell your business, do you really want to play such hardball that you're going to walk away from a life-changing check? If you own a car dealership in Cincinnati and this is your ticket to your retirement, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah,
I still, on these kinds of negotiations, I like to take a very muscular stance. I don't care what size the business is. And so I want to see that acquirer have a little bit of skin in the game. The other thing, if you go back to the LOI, this is something that, I've participated in the past, using the impending likelihood of an LOI coming is an incredibly powerful tactic to smoke out other potential buyers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see people, we see this in tech all the time, saying, hey, listen, Jimmy, Fred, Wilma, Betty, and Barney, we got Jimmy over here, and we think we're expecting an LOI on Tuesday, and so you better get with the program, because once we sign this LOI, we're going to be no shop for 60. They're going to know this, right? And so the impending likelihood of an LOI can be an incredible event for forcing action.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and you're right. I think sharing with a potential acquirer that, hey, we've been in negotiations with company X. It seems to be progressing towards a letter of intent that we're expecting next week. We've had a great relationship over the last 5 years. We've been partners for all this time. If you ever had sort of any interest in a more strategic relationship with us, now might be the time to engage in that conversation. I think you have to be careful not to overplay your hand, because if you are Google, or if you're Facebook, or you're Apple, you don't have to buy anybody, right? You've got so much market clout that you're not going to die by not buying this company. And so by overplaying your hand and being too aggressive, some acquirers will avoid being basically brought into an auction, right? They'll be like, "Hey, good for you, Jimmy. Sounds great. Go for it." Right? So I think you want to bring them in, but not be so bold that you're basically saying, the offer's due midnight on Monday, or you're out, because a lot of people would just say, "Okay, well, I'm out." So again, depending on how much leverage you have, we're talking about negotiation. We're talking about poker, right? So without knowing the specific situation, but if you've got lots of leverage, you've got lots of acquirers, then by all means, put a deadline on your deal. If you're like most people and you don't have the luxury of those things, you may have to bring them along more slowly. But yes, I agree. Having a letter of intent coming is gonna kind of get people off the hop if they've been curious.
It certainly can backfire on you. My wife and I, sort of our side hustle is we build homes for resale, and we're not in the flipping business. We actually build homes, and we try to build beautiful, remarkable homes. My wife's a genius. Anyway, we a property we bought a few years ago. We were looking at it. We thought all the economics penciled out, et cetera, et cetera. The realtor tells our realtor, "Hey, listen, we're expecting at least a dozen offers here. Just tell your client to sharpen their pencil." We put in our offer, which was at asking. We try to have a very sober approach to these things, because this kind of work is a fast way to go bankrupt if you get it wrong. And so she comes back and says, "Hey, you sure you don't want your client doesn't want you to your client doesn't want to add more to this thing, because we're going to have all these offers." And she's talking it up. Our realtor calls us. We say, no, we're going to give them asking, cash, no bullshit, real good, clean deal. But if that doesn't get it done, then fuck it. We were the only offer.
Interesting.
And I don't know that homeowner will ever know how badly that realtor fucked it up, because if there was anywhere remotely close to that level of interest, she scared everybody off, and we held fast, and everyone else didn't, to your point, write the offer.
Yeah. You can overplay your hand, right? In any of these negotiations. So I agree. You want to create some competitive tension, and I think there's a subtlety to it that is why M&A professionals get paid the big bucks, right? There is a little bit of a romance that goes on. It's not just quite as in your face as I would like it to be sometimes.
Yeah. Now, are there anything else you think that entrepreneurs and business owners should be thinking about as they build a business that is poised to be sold?
Man, I mean, we've talked about a lot. I'd be surprised if anybody's still listening, by the way. It's a long interview.
First of all, it's just you and me. Every once in a while, my mom listens, but that's really
okay, good. Well, then, hi, Mom. Yeah, look, we measure. We have everybody who starts with us, all the entrepreneurs who use Valuable, we give them a score out of 8 different drivers, right? So we've talked about some of the biggies. So there's like recurring revenue is one of the big ones. Growth potential is another one of the big ones. Switzerland structure is how dependent the company is on its owner. Another one probably that folks should be, that we sort of started on as well, was kind of hub and spoke, which is, how dependent the business is on the owner. The Switzerland structure is how dependent it is on any one customer, employer, supplier. So those two are unique. It's funny. Do you know Tim Ferriss? Have you ever had Tim on the show?
I have not. I've met him a couple times. I'm good friends with a good friend of his, but no.
Oh, cool. Okay, so
you know what? On one hand, I'd love to have him on, but he's been on so many other like I got nothing to add. Like his thing, like everybody knows already. So
right.
I don't know what I'd ask him because it's like, well, we know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd be able to get something out of him. Anyway, I talked to him. I interviewed him for a story I was writing about selling companies. And I said, because he got his start, he had this company called Brain Quicken. He sold it, which gave him some of the money and the freedom to start his first book, which 4 Hour Work, which became this huge international bestseller. So I said, like, why did you sell the company? Like, you had this thing down to 4 hours a week. Like, why not just keep it and milk the thing forever if it's only taking you 4 hours? And he said, well, it only took me 4 hours of actual physical work, but it was like my brain was running antivirus software. He was like, it was always slowing down my CPU, because even though I was only, doing 4 hours worth of work at this company, it was always in the back of my mind, right? So I guess the other thing that I might raise is for people who have successful businesses and they go like, why would I bother selling it? This thing's just kind of going. There's an enormous amount of I think, CPU usage that gets sucked up in your mind by running a company. And the moment you sell it, there's a chunk of your brain that gets free. And so I think there's something it's one of the big reasons I think people should always be kind of building to sell, thinking about, what's the end game. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want to sell it, but that you're building it so that you could, if it ever gets to be too much or you want out, you've got that option. So
yeah. The other one, we see this in tech a lot. I'd be curious to see if you see it a lot outside of tech. Smart entrepreneurs purposely position their companies so that if they quote unquote have to sell, per the built to last versus built to sell conversation, that to hopefully it's a reasonable number of acquirers, this thing looks like it fits in their company. Yeah. And so when we think about category design, branding, even product strategy, part of it is, can we build a long-term publicly traded company? But the other part of it is, how does this fit into Oracle's product line? How does this fit into IBM's product line, Cisco's product line, Apple's product, and how might they view it? And even down to naming the company. I don't want to say who because it's totally inappropriate, but there was a company I was involved with several years ago that's doing incredibly well now. I'm super proud of these guys, young entrepreneurs, and they're in a very big space. They've reimagined it in a whole new way. That's why they're killing it. But as you might imagine, there's a bunch of big players in this space. There is probably 6 or 7 logical acquirers, and of those, there's one super logical acquirer, if I could call it that. So we purposely named it something that we knew the leaders of that company would more than likely really like. That is to say, if the press release came out, the press release would look really good and make them look really good, and it would make sense to the world and so forth and so on. And luckily, they haven't sold the company, and I think there's a really good chance they'll be a standalone public company. But we did think about all of that, and so I guess my question is, as you're starting or even as you're building your company, how do you want entrepreneurs to think about positioning their companies, naming their companies, positioning their products, naming their products in the context of the broader landscape?
Yeah, no, I think it's brilliant. And so I can share some personal experience on this one. So my last company was a quantitative syndicated market research company. It was acquired by the company, Gartner Group is the company now. They're, they do a lot of syndicated research. In any event, when we looked at the landscape of people that would likely acquire our business, and we were sort of making the business up and thinking about it, we looked at them and we looked at how they run. So the way they call their product syndicated market research, we call it syndicated market research. Even down to the people in the company. So they had, managing directors or vice presidents or, engagement managers or using the vernacular that they use. You can, especially when it comes to people, you can really easily see how it fits in, right? So their VPs could be our VPs, but if you use, directors and getting the vernacular right, the product name. So it really does, you can, if you think about it from the acquirer's point of view, the least integration, the highest degree of likelihood that the integration is going to be successful it de-risks it for them, right? So if they look at it and say, yeah, they use the same CRM platform we do, right? Whether you could find that out or not,
right,
but if your natural acquirer is using Salesforce.com, then by all means, start using Salesforce.com if you have the luxury of picking a CRM platform. Yeah. Because the less they need to integrate, obviously, the better. So I think it's great. And we did it intentionally in my last company.
Interesting. All right, John, anything else before we kick out of this one?
No, man. It's the first time I've been called a douchebag and the conversation has lasted this long. So that's good.
I meant it with love, and as a fellow Canadian, and I wanted you to come on because I actually thought I was wrong. I thought your point of view is a very important one, so I was trying to be humorous with you.
I had a great time. It was fun. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks. I appreciate your work. I super appreciate your time, and I think it's a really important set of topics for entrepreneurs to think about. So, thank you, John.
Cool, man. Thank you.
You're legendary, my friend.
Okay.
Whew. Very illuminating. Stoked to be able to have this conversation, and even more stoked to be able to share it with you. So if you know somebody in your life who would love this conversation with John, why not share with them right now? If you're using a Apple Podcast or some other podcast app like Podbeam or something like that, there's a share feature right there. And we would love you just a little bit extra if you shared this on social media. Your shares make a huge difference. Legends and Losers is growing pretty significantly right now, and we know you're the reason why, and I can't thank you enough for that. All right. We would like to thank the Automatic Customer, creating a subscription business in any industry, by our friend and today's guests, John Warrillow. The new book by Heather Clancy and myself, Niche Down, How to Become Legendary by Being Different. Check out nichedownbook.com. Subscribe to get the foreword by Hal Elrod for free. OneLifeFullyLived.org. Dream, plan, and live your best life. Check out OneLifeFullyLived.org. If you're a thought leader, get your leading thoughts on some podcasts. Check out InterviewValet.com. They are my podcast booking agent. They specialize in what's called podcast interview marketing, the smart way to get yourself on podcasts. And if you love Santa Cruz and you're thinking about living here, check out Mike Bloch, BLOCH, real estate team at mikeblock.com. And speaking of places that I love, if you want to live in Tahoe, Truckee, check out TahoeTruckeeHomes.com. My good friend Matt Hansen will take great care of you. Now, speaking of other things I love, check out one of my favorite podcasts by the nicest man in podcasting, Stop Riding the Pine with Jamie J. And then another podcast I love that I was on recently, Outliers by Ever Gonzalez. This is a fantastic podcast. If you love Legends and Losers, you will love Outliers. Check out Outliers with Evan Gonzalez. And the official coffee of Legends and Losers, of course, is Verve Coffee. Check them out at vervecoffee.com. And my favorite sales app, Spiro.ai, the sales app for salespeople and sales managers who like to make money. And speaking of making money, if you want to help small entrepreneurs around the world grow, check out Kiva.org, the nonprofit providing microfinance loans that make a difference in the developing world. Kiva.org. All right, I need to remind you that today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes, and this oddcast is a sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love it if you shared the shit out of it. We must warn you, Legends and Losers may contain forward-looking statements, backward-looking statements, or completely asinine statements. Remember, all rights could differ materially. Listen to the Tragically Hip, teach entrepreneurship. Remember to buy pasture-raised, free-range eggs only. Be a podcast legend. Introduce two people you love to two podcasts you love. Help them get it set up on their smartphone or their tablet or something like that. Thank you, Dandy Candy. I love you, Mom and Dad. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Today, our deepest apologies go out to Marcus Rust, Chief Executive of Rose Acre Farms. Sorry, Marcus. We just ran out of time for you. That's it, my friends. Thank you for investing part of your life, and we'll see you again soon on Legends and Losers.